Well, before Mr. Shimonovich left for Ukraine last time, he asked for a meeting with me, and we did meet, and I asked him just one thing. I asked him, tell the truth about the events in Odessa on May the 2nd. And unfortunately, the report they have produced fell short of telling the truth. It creates the impression that the people who died in Odessa almost torched themselves in that building to which they had to escape being pursued by a mob, by armed gangs, which clearly have been preparing for this kind of a massacre. And as you know, our foreign minister sent a letter yesterday to the Secretary General of the United Nations asking him to conduct an impartial investigation. There is good reason for that, also because use of chemicals is involved in Odessa, and that has to be investigated as well. And now we do have a good practice of cooperation between the United Nations and OPCW in investigating such matters. So to us it's completely logical that the Secretary General should take up the initiative and make sure that there is a proper investigation. Today in consultation, Mr. Shimonovich responded telling us that there are 4 different investigations going on in Ukraine, that the Council of Europe is involved in some form. It does sound very much like something which is aimed at creating chaos rather than a proper investigation, which could lead to definitive results. So our initiative continues to be on the table, and we hope that the Secretary General is going to look constructively into this matter. Of course, in consultation with the authorities in Kiev and with others in Ukraine who have to be involved. Now, the second thing I'd like to mention is that we did criticize quite extensively the report which was produced by the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights. We believe that it basically repeats the Kiev narrative of events and does not reflect many aspects of the situation which are of concern to the people in eastern Ukraine and to all those in Ukraine who want to have a normal political process and want to have a normal life in that country. We did draw attention to the fate of journalists who have been captured in the past few days by the Kiev authorities in a very brutal manner. Unfortunately, we didn't hear any criticism of that from our Western colleagues in the course of the discussion. Those same colleagues who theoretically in numerous meetings of the Security Council tend to speak about the need to protect journalists. We did draw the attention to the fact that the report did not speak at all. Even though it does refer to Crimea, it does not refer at all to the fact that the Kiev authorities have cut off water supplies to Crimea, and of course it's a violation of a number of rules and standards of international law. The response we received from Mr. Shimonovich was quite surprising. He said that they were investigating it. How long does one have to investigate a situation which is completely clear? Because I think even from high orbit satellites you can see that the canals through which the water comes to Crimea, water paid for by people in Crimea incidentally, has not been going to the peninsula. So this kind of prolonged investigation seems to be surprising. A clear-cut position of High Commissioner for Human Rights should have been taken on this a long time ago. And we had another rather strange discussion about the use of force in eastern Ukraine. I asked Mr. Shimonovich about his attitude to the artillery bombardment which is going on the town of Slavyansk. The response again was that they were investigating. And incidentally, in the course of this discussion, I was pleased to note that many colleagues watch Russian television very carefully. So all those who do watch Russian television could have seen numerous examples, and particularly of the shelling of Slavyansk in the past few days. Moreover, I asked this question in a different form. Can you say that if the allegations of artillery bombardment were proven, that would be an excessive use of force by Ukrainian authorities, by the Kiev authorities in Slavyansk? Again, I have not received an answer. So, also our colleagues in the Security Council, even though some of them were speaking in the course of discussion about de-escalation, some of them were speaking in course of discussion about the need to investigate the events in Odessa on the 2nd of May. Some of them were speaking about the need for the people in eastern Ukraine, those people whom they call separatists, to be involved in the political discussions, something which, as you know, the Ukrainian authorities, the Kiev authorities have been reluctant to accept. But when it came to trying to sum up our discussions, again, unfortunately, members of the Security Council could not have the political courage to put those positions into something which the President of the Security Council could share with you after the meeting on behalf of the Security Council. You will recall that even on the 2nd of May, the Security Council, the last time we discussed the situation in Ukraine, the members of the Security Council could not simply say that violence must stop. There was initial proposal for some language from the Russian delegation. Then the President of the Council came with this very short phrase. But even that short phrase did not turn out to be acceptable to our Western colleagues. So unfortunately, we have to come to the conclusion that the position of some of the members of the Security Council continues to be very uncertain. And in our view, it is one of the factors which creates this atmosphere and uncertainty in Ukraine. With very great delay, some steps are being taken. Those round tables finally have been arranged, but unfortunately things have been done in a way which does not look as entirely persuasive to many people in Ukraine, including particularly in the east of the country. So we'll see how things are going to proceed. As you know, as far as Russia is concerned, all along we have been advocating inclusive dialogue. We have played a crucial role in preparing the Geneva Statement on April 17. We supported the OSCE roadmap, which incidentally the Kiev authorities have not embraced publicly so far. So as far as we are concerned, we are trying to make a positive contribution to the resolution of this crisis in Ukraine, which we played no part in creating, in contrast to some of our Western colleagues.
What Russia's current position is toward the presidential elections to be held this Sunday. In the past, it's been criticized. And secondly, President Putin has made now several times the announcement of the pullback of troops from the border of Ukraine, but observers, at least from NATO, have indicated they haven't seen actual withdrawal of the troops. So can you give us a status on that? Thank
you. Those who do want to see, they see. And this is simply a kind of a political thing. Of course, there is a pullback of Russian forces from the region, as has been announced by President Putin.
Can you comment on the elections?
Elections, you know, from the outset, we were open-minded. And President Putin did say recently that it's a step in the right direction. But of course, those need to be proper elections. I personally cannot see how one can claim that there are proper elections in a country when they are shelling, you know, towns and conducting a military operation in the eastern region of Ukraine. One of my colleagues today said we need to de-escalate violence. My French colleague, actually. I said, yes, let's ask the President of the Security Council to say that. And unfortunately, again, they were not prepared to endorse the escalation of violence. So what we see is a very confusing situation. I suppose we need to make our judgment after the event. We'll see what happens on May the 25, and then we'll take a position on that.
Mr. Ambassador, if you would like to...
The lady behind you. And then.
Ambassador, thank you. Do you plan to veto the Syria ICC resolution tomorrow?
Yes, we do.
Can you explain your reasoning?
Yes, we do. I'll give my reasoning tomorrow. It's the fact that the resolution is going to vote we regard as simply a publicity stunt, which will have a detrimental effect, unfortunately, on our joint efforts in trying to resolve politically the crisis in Syria. But what will come, please.
Ambassador, if you would describe, besides what you have just said on Mr. Simonovich's report, just for the headlines, how would you describe it? Completely rejected, there is something inside, or something that is really contributing to, as you said, to chaos before, if I've heard? I'm
not going to write your headlines. Please do your job. But one thing we agreed on, Mr. Simonovich did say that they believe that the events in Odessa on May 2 need to be independently investigated. And we picked up that line, and as I mentioned, we referred to the letter Minister Lavrov sent to Secretary General Ban about it. But unfortunately, the members of the Council were not able to support our call for the members of the Security Council to appeal to the Secretary General to make arrangements for impartial investigation.
Has there?
You say that you're concerned about the elections in Ukraine this weekend because of the shelling. Does that mean you're also concerned about the June 3rd elections coming up in Syria, where there's bombings every day?
We are concerned, yes. We are concerned. You know, there are elections in different countries. They do different things under different circumstances. In Afghanistan, of course, they had an election under a situation which is far from normal, and our Western colleagues accepted it as a proper way to conduct elections. And previously in Afghanistan, we had similar situations. Of course, the elections in Syria are not going to be conducted under perfect circumstances. This is the decision they made to conduct those elections. Again, we'll see what comes out of it.
What kind of investigation would you like of having on Odessa? In terms of, would you like it to be, you mentioned OPCW or something like a Selstrom investigation, and also on the UN-marked helicopters. I wanted to ask you this again. I know that your government asked the Secretary to respond. Yeah. I've asked, gotten no answer. Have you gotten an answer?
We have got no response. We're continuing to double check, and we hope to get a response to that from the Secretariat, but so far we have not received that. Investigation? I think the Secretary General needs to make up his mind. Since there are so many different negotiations in Ukraine, I'm sure the UN could play a very useful role in bringing all them together and also bringing in the OPCW. And for this, we have now good tradition and good practice in the destruction of the Syrian chemical arsenal.
Are we back to Cold War?
No, we are not. No.
Can you say a few words on the floods in Balkans, and are you going to
what?
Floods in Balkans, in Serbia and
Bosnia?
Horrible.
And
are you going to? Okay.
We have been watching it with a great compassion for our friends in the Balkan countries, and you know, Emercom, Russia, have been very active in bringing in humanitarian supplies. Horrible disaster.
President of Serbia next week in New York, Mr. Nikolic.
Is he coming? No, I mean, yes. This is good news. I hope I'll have an opportunity.
The German press was recently reporting about the rise of fascism in Ukraine and some people sponsoring those fascists. Has this been come during the discussion today with the members?
No, not today, but obviously we are very concerned, to put it mildly, about the tendency when the portraits of Nazi collaborators are carried around by young people, particularly. I mean, it must have taken years of indoctrination for the young people to be completely confused and to believe who actually fought in support of Hitler were doing any good to their country. They were not bringing any good to the country, particularly in a situation where the Nazis were killing Ukrainians by the million. So it's all very disturbing and is being exploited for purposes of fanning hostility, including hostility towards Russia. That's why we have been proposing this resolution in the General Assembly for the past 8 or 9 years on fighting glorification of Nazism, and these developments show that it continues to be a very relevant subject for the world. Thank you very much.